Welcome, everyone. I want to welcome you to the REACT Tuesday Takeovers, the special edition. I want to say we're taking over the takeovers, but actually it's a special partnership. The CTA Civil Rights and Education Committee is partnering with our Racial Equity Affairs Committee with our Tuesday Takeovers for Racial Justice throughout this entire month. So this is just our first series to kick off a few more panels that we have to come. Before we dive in deep, I want to first start with our land acknowledgement. I know that we're all in different places throughout the state of California, maybe even some outside of California. And so I want to start by acknowledging that I'm here in San Jose and I'm on the traditional land of the Ohlone peoples, past and present. We honor them with gratitude, the land itself, and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. If you're able to, or as we go along, you'll hear from the different lands that we're here. If you want to find out and learn more about the indigenous people who steward the land in your area, you can do so by downloading the app called Native Land. Again, the app is Native Land. So if you want to learn more about the indigenous people in the land in which you reside on, you can download the app to learn more. All right, so we are here. We are kicking off a special series on ethnic studies, and I am thrilled to have an amazing, awe-inspiring educators that I just absolutely adore and have the utmost respect for, and I'm looking forward to our rich conversation and in the broader context. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge the support that we have, the people that you can't see working behind the scenes. We have some strong women. We have an all-women tech crew running things behind the scenes. So I want to just take a moment. Do you all mind just popping in and saying hello and introducing yourselves really quickly to those who are watching? And
hi, everyone. My name is Elise Dixon. I work for CTA in the IT department, pronouns she, her, and I am on Patwin land, I believe.
Hey, everybody. My name is Sam DeMuro. I am CTA's social media person. So all the things, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. So I'm on Ohlone land, I believe, in San Mateo.
Miss Monica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Tamrath. I'm the Human Rights Manager, and I am joining from Ohlone land in San Francisco.
And then Miss Kenya and Sarah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Staff Consultant to Civil Rights and Education Committee, along with Lisa Adams, who's not able to join us today. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am from Guax land.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Robinson. I'm Vice Chair for CRE, and I'm also the at-large for Bay Valley Service Center. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am coming to you from Tongva land here in the South Bay.
Beautiful. Now I want to give our panelists each an opportunity to introduce themselves. And for anyone who and for myself, my name is Tanya Jaco. I am a middle school language arts and social studies teacher here in San Jose. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'll be facilitating our discussion and looking forward to it. I'm going to start with Lupe. Would you mind just introducing yourselves and for our panelists, your role in education, your pronouns, the land in which you come from, and your role in education?
Absolutely. My name is Guadalupe Carrasco Cardona. I'm she, her, hers, ella. And I'm standing right now, or sitting in this chair right now on Tongva land, Yangana, Los Angeles. And my role in education has been for the past 21 years. I have taught high school ELA, a little bit of middle school ELA and social studies, and high school social studies, including of course, ethnic studies and, multicultural literature, yearbook, journalism, everything. I've taught tons of stuff. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. And
would you like me to go next?
oh, Guillermo, yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, fellow educators. I'm Guillermo Gomez. I'm residing and honoring the Kumeyaay indigenous land here in what is called today San Diego. I'm a 26-year veteran teacher. I taught elementary school, bilingual education, primarily for 12 years in Chula Vista, California. I'm now a social studies teacher in San Diego Unified. I teach ethnic studies, 9th grade and our 11th grade ethnic studies, U.S. Her Story and History course. I'm also one of the lead teachers for our district of ethnic studies, in which we train and we build curriculum for our district. I'm also a member of the Association of Raza Educators, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you. And my pronouns, I'm him, his, and he.
Awesome. Thank you. And Ivan?
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Ivan Varai Santos. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I currently reside and work on Chochenyo Ohlone land. Very specifically, I teach at James Logan High School in Union City, California, where I'm in my 18th year of teaching, and I am currently the department chair of our ethnic studies department. I'm also the coordinator of our new ethnic studies and social justice academy, and I am currently teaching Asian American studies, Filipinx heritage studies, world studies, US HX theory, econ, and gov. And I appreciate the opportunity to share space with you all.
Y'all, the lineup is serious business. This is serious business. We have real educators with us tonight. Alfonso is just now joining us, and he is our last and final panelist. Alfonso, I'm so glad that you can make it and squeezing us into your busy schedule. We're just introducing ourselves briefly, if you don't mind sharing your pronouns, the land that you're on, and your role in education.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I'm late. Sorry, I'm tardy. I was trying to get in. This is new technology with the Cisco thing. I'm used to using Zoom. I apologize. My name is Alfonso Thompson. As she said, I teach ethnic studies at Washington High School in Fremont. My pronouns are him, his, and him, his, and he. And I've been teaching for, 15 years. I pioneered the ethnic studies program at Washington High School, and I'm in Fremont. The indigenous land that I'm on is the Ohlone land, and I was an original member of the Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee that pioneering the new curriculum for the state.
Awesome. We are so fortunate to have all of you. I'm looking forward to gaining insight and perspective. So I want to frame our discussion a little bit. To start us off, because we're hearing more and more about ethnic studies, right? And we see these kind of battles going on, not just in our local areas and with our school districts, but also at the state level, right? We're seeing legislation for calling for ethnic studies curriculum. We're seeing legislation calling for ethnic studies to be a requirement for graduation and to be implemented. And for some folks, this is all of a sudden, right? And we're kind of seeing this battle play out, not just in our locals, but also, within our state legislature. And so the purpose of us is, first of all, to give our educators an opportunity to gain insight and understanding. First of all, what is ethnic studies? So I want to just take the time and we can go back around. If you can just explain to us, give us a definition. What is ethnic studies? And maybe why are we seemingly hearing about this right now? And let's just go back through. Guillermo, can I start with you? Is that okay? And then just whoever feels led to go after.
So ethnic studies, it's a community movement that started over 50 years ago. It was one of the outcomes of the civil rights movement, in which in California we saw that there was a demographic change in our schools, right, in higher education. So it started as a movement for higher education, and it's like an interdisciplinary study of race, ethnicity, indigeneity. That focuses on the lives of the most marginalized groups here in the United States, right? So at first it started as an upper grade course. As a higher education course, but we would like to think that ethnic studies for K to 12 is not a class. We would like to think that it's a way of teaching. You can teach ethnic studies in math, science, English, art, PE, social studies, with an ethnic studies goal. But I think that the goal of ethnic studies is incorporating love and respect for every community, for every culture and faith. We want an ethnic studies pedagogy that focuses on love, right? It must begin with loving yourself first. All of you, right? Or valuing your identity, right? Helping every kid embrace themselves in order to start embracing others and accepting others. I think that once through ethnic studies pedagogy, once we start loving each other, then we begin this goal of freedom, right? And I think, Bob Marley and one of his songs said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, right? And through education, we know that it's a tool not only for liberation of your mind, of your soul and your body. It's also besides liberation, it's improvement not only for yourself, but for your family and your community, right? And it's exploring and experiencing what it's like to live free, right? We want a world, if you start thinking about it, I also teach at San Diego State pre-service teachers, right? And we always ask the first question, why did you get into teaching, right? And if you remember, if you can go back to your first year as teaching, is because you love humanity, right? You want to make an impact in the world, right? But as we get involved in teaching, right, and all the hardships that come with teaching in public education, we forget about the initial passion, which is to change the world, right? So through ethnic studies, it's an education, so where in which people love each other, care for each other, where people want each other to be free, right? And I think that's why it's important to do this work, okay? Is to get closer to freedom, to get closer to love, right? And move away from greed and exploitation. So we can look at the academic side of ethnic studies, which has shown that, improves not only the academic engagement and success of students, right? It has been studied, it has been researched that, improves the GPA, that improves graduation numbers, that improves admittance to college and stuff like that. But I think the initial, right, or the ultimate goal is to accept each other and to love each other, right? Just like in the spirit of En Lakesh, right? You are my other me, right? If I love and respect you, then I love and respecting myself, right? So that's what ethnic studies is to me.
And I can add to that.
Alfonso.
Oh, you're gonna pass it to Alfonso? Okay.
To Lupe.
Okay, he just popcorned it back to me. Yeah, I mean, I agree with exactly everything that Guillermo said, and I think that in addition to that, like as a discipline, right? So there's ethnic studies in the very abstract way, but as a discipline, we should really look at like what it is and how it evolved over the past 50 years. And that's really important because a lot of folks are trying to get real fluid with, what else it should include when, that's not really like other folks' kind of decision to decide. There are, 50 years of struggle to make this a discipline. It's been developed by, scholars and community organizers and practitioners. And so it specifically refers to 4 racialized ethnic groups, which is really broad, right? Okay, a lot of folks fit within those 4 racialized ethnic groups that have experienced, a history of marginalization, genocide, exclusion, oppression, like so many things, but also, of course, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of like beautiful history of resistance and just beautiful culture and language and so much more that that also comes with those 4 racialized ethnic groups. And so when you think of ethnic studies, you really think of centering those voices, right? The voices of the people who fall within that umbrella of the 4 racialized ethnic groups. And it's not to say that in our school systems that we shouldn't be talking about other groups. It's that these 4 racialized ethnic groups have been marginalized, have been dehumanized, have been excluded so fiercely that it has an impact on our conditions today. And it is like ethnic studies is love, all the things Guillermo said, right? And what is like the absence of that? Like when you don't love yourself, then, you know, a lot of, you know, just self-destructive types of behaviors. Like I can even say like within my own family, right? My own community, like I know within my own life, right? The self-destruction that happens when you are not in love with yourself, when you don't know who you are, you don't understand your place in the world, you don't understand the systems around you that led to like the conditions that you're living in, you start to believe it yourself, right? And so it's very important that we really just define ethnic studies properly as in, you know, the 4 racialized ethnic groups, because if we don't do that, then it's going to get so watered down again that that we're going to be excluded from the discipline that our ancestors, that those people before us like have been fighting for 50 years. For sure, we have like, we know a historical date that began, but we also know for like 500 years, right? Our peoples have been fighting for this for a long time, since the amochlis were being burned in you know, Mexico, since you know, since folks were being prevented from learning how to read, you know, while working on, or not working, but working as enslaved people on plantations. Like there has been a widespread attempt to prevent us from learning who we are, learning like how to read, how to know our own histories. And so we need to be clear that ethnic studies is to fight to bring that back so that we can become knowledgeable of who we are again. And yes, you know, there are many other groups that don't fall within those 4 racialized ethnic groups. And I want to learn about them, and I want to embrace them, and I don't want to ever dehumanize them, but they do not fall under the definition of what is ethnic studies. And so now I'm going to bounce it to Alfonso.
Okay. Thank you, Lupe. Lupe and Guillermo, you guys absolutely right. I'm just going to quickly add that, you know, those four key groups are the focus, based on the original founders of ethnic studies, the Third World Liberation Front, the BSU at San Francisco State. That was the focus, so that their narratives and that their stories are told in the first person, so that the history will show who they are, the ancestors, everything that they witnessed is very important. Their story is very important. And until we just make sure that we solidify that, we're going to always have problems like we have today in society. Okay, because their stories are not told, their stories are not heard. They're forgotten, and that's what's important, to make sure that those stories are solidified. Yes, yeah.
Right on. If I'd like to definitely add that, you know, the way I see ethnic studies and in my experience as an educator, you know, it in a nutshell, it's pretty much why folks got into education in the first place. I'm saying if you think back to and think about the decision you made to become an educator, it's to care for the whole student, right? To touch their spirit, care for their relationship with education, right? Ethnic studies challenges the traditional banking approach to education, right? It's student and community responsive pedagogy. It definitely allows the student to take hold of their own education and take care of their relationship with education, because we know that the traditional public school approach is a colonizing approach, right? It's an approach that forces all of us, you know, no matter where you were born, no matter what cities or neighborhoods you grew up in, it forces us to assimilate into this system that wasn't necessarily meant for any single one of our students, right? I like to see ethnic studies as a humanizing approach, right? When we center the voices of those students in our classrooms, they own their education, right? Their voices are empowered, they're strengthened. And like what folks said, it's love, it's hope. And especially in our time right now in this pandemic, it's mental health, right? Our focus has to be the mental health, the wellness of not only our students, but also their families and the community, right? It's teaching them radical self-care, right? And through the pedagogy, through our approach, we allow our students to understand what that love is, to understand that love for community and understanding that solidarity, so that they could envision a new future, right? Not the normal that folks are saying we're trying to get back to, but to really imagine what a future would look like if our voices and the voices of our ancestors were really valued, were centered, right? And really given the respect that we all, try to fight for, not only in our classrooms, but, in our families and communities, like folks said, right? I like to see ethnic studies seen as that type of education that doesn't stay in the notebooks, that doesn't stay on Google Drives, that isn't a bubble in test at the end of the semester. It's that education that you will carry with you throughout the rest of your life, right? I know a lot of institutions like to take a look at very specific data, to say, oh, are our students successful, right? Ethnic studies isn't that type of discipline. Ethnic studies isn't that type of pedagogy, right? We see the success of ethnic studies in the choices that our young adults make as they grow through this society and understand their socio-political context, right? And so at the end of the day, we can definitely see ethnic studies as love, right? Love for self, love for community, just to bring it right back, full circle into what Guillermo was saying.
Wonderful. Now, all of you touched on what I heard each of you say, is it centered of these marginalized and racialized groups, right? And then it's about love, and it's a holistic approach to education. It sounds warm and fuzzy, right? But there's also, we start to see kind of, as I think Lupe kind of mentioned it, watering it down. So can you just clarify, how do you distinguish between ethnic studies and just this inclusive? So if I'm a classroom teacher and I start reading a book that was written by has a Black author, or their stories of a Latinx people, does that constitute as ethnic studies? If I'm just diversifying, my curriculum, is that sufficient? Does that make it an ethnic studies class? What does that look like, and how do you distinguish between an ethnic studies class and just something that's, culturally inclusive?
I can start. I'll just share a little bit. Like, part of what I would look at is looking at a critical ethnic studies class, right? So there is where the students look at themselves and they look at their stories of their ancestors. But really, when I think of a good critical ethnic studies class, is like a class that's really looking at larger systems and larger historical processes, because what we want as ethnic studies educators is to liberate the student from those oppressive ways of thinking, but also for them to be able to see themselves as agents of change. So what is it that we want our students to change? We want them to see the oppressive systems that have that are still in place, that still allow for students to be pushed out of schools, for police terror to exist in our communities. Like, there's we can just go on and on about all of the systems that are in place, and to really empower students to basically obliterate those systems and create something new, right? Something transformative, something better, something that is good for all of us. And so sort of like a diversifying class, may look at like some historical events, may have, like foods, heroes, and holidays, and, may be really empowering, like may make you feel really good, warm and fuzzy, as you said before, but doesn't really help students to see how they can truly sort of transform the system that has been oppressive, like not just here, but internationally. And so, so that would be one of the main distinctions between a critical ethnic studies class and what has been coined a constructive ethnic studies class.
Yeah, if I can add to what Lupe was referring to, so we want to make it very clear that it's not a multicultural education, right? Ethnic studies is not just something that you just take from your shelf on February, for Black History Month, or September for what some people call Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Ethnic studies is embedded in critical pedagogy, right? In which we value the stories, right? We value the knowledge of the students, right? And together as a teacher and a student, we build together in the classroom, right? So it's like everyone has been mentioned, and I've been mentioned, it's that the humanization process, not only for the student, but also for the teacher, right? We can give you the best ethnic studies content and just throw it at you. But if the teacher does not engage in a reaffirmation why they became educators, if the teacher is not exploring and questioning our own biases, because we all have them, right? We all have biases when we go into the classroom, right? Then how do we struggle with that, right? How do we humanize ourselves as teachers, right? It's embedding that not only the theory but the practice. So the end goal of an ethnic studies course is to eliminate racism. It's to eliminate any form of oppression, right? Students be able to not only value themselves and then be able to identify when the systems of oppression are attacking our specific identities. Many people, say, well, when do we do restorative practices, right? When do we do this and that? That's already embedded in ethnic studies, as I mentioned, right? Well, there's a process that we call narrative medicine, in which we sit down and then we use an indigenous practice and sitting in a circle and talking about not only issues about ourselves, but also we start integrating academic content. Okay, so ethnic studies touches in all the four modes of learning, right? We know as human beings we learn by writing, reading, speaking, and listening. So that's already embedded in ethnic studies. It's not something that you're gonna have to find something else to integrate in your classroom. It's already it's a way of life. You as an ethnic study, that's the end in the four walls of the classroom, right? When I'm driving home, I'm already thinking of ethnic studies. When I get home, it's probably the most hard job for me because I have three little kids and one is going to college, right? So I have to be like an ethnic studies teacher at home, right? I cannot be in the classroom teaching how to liberate ourselves, right? I have to end oppression and then come home and be an oppressed husband or be an oppressive father, right? So ethnic studies is just keeping you in check, right? And it's something that never ends. Right? I've been doing this work for 10 or plus years, and every day I'm learning something about ethnic studies. It's evolved, right? It's just flipping public education. It's just flipping our curriculum and making our curriculum more not only relevant, but sustaining that culture, practices and teachings and learnings.
All right, did anybody want to add on before? Okay, so what I heard you say, really is it's all inclusive. It's a holistic approach, right? We're looking at not just the content of what we're teaching, but how you're interacting with students and what your discipline policies look like on campus, and the grading. I heard someone say earlier, about not just filling in a bubble in a test. So my question is this just a class that is for high school students? Because this sounds, you're asking students to critique a system. Is that appropriate for, second graders and third graders? Can ethnic studies be taught in primary grades, or is this just something for high school?
I can speak to it, but I want to right now give an anecdote of why it's important for youngsters, okay? My nephew is biracial. It's my cousin's son. So my cousin is a Chicana and her son is half Black. And my aunt takes care of other kids. That's what she does for a living. She stays home and she has kids that she takes care of. And my nephew was watching some, I don't know, we'll just say Disney show. I don't know, it was some show that was on, and he loves dance. He's young. He's only, he just turned 8 like last week. And so he was saying like, I want to be like that. And one of the kids literally said, you can never be like that because you're Black. Right? That's exactly what was just told to my nephew from another little 6, 7-year-old kid. And so, of course, my aunt was like, whoop, time out. And, she sat there and gave the whole lesson, right? But that just shows you that kids need ethnic studies as young as possible, like pre-K, like home daycare, like they need ethnic studies from the get-go, because if not, they're going to go through all of these years of education and living in this world. And it can't be till, we get them as freshmen, sophomore, juniors in high school that they hear it for the first time. And that, unfortunately, is what we hear a lot, right? We hear a lot of really powerful young teachers or powerful young college students who say, I never knew this existed until I went to college. And here's the thing, if we let these little youngsters have ethnic studies when they're young, they will all go to college. They will be so empowered. They will go to college. They will change the world, right? But unfortunately, a lot of them are turned off from school before they even get to us. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And I need to make sure, I'm really happy that my aunt and my cousin, they're very, they're ethnic studies. They're not educators, but they're ethnic studies practitioners in the world. And we're able to give that lesson in that setting. And so, yeah, they need to have it from when they're babies for life.
Like what Guillermo was, I'm sorry. I was saying, just like what Guillermo was saying, at the end of the day, we go home and ethnic studies doesn't stop for us, right? Especially if we have children. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and the way my partner and I have always looked at what we teach is that if our children are conscious enough to understand Star Wars and the Avengers and all these movies, they can understand ethnic studies, right? They understand what revolution is. They understand what murder is. They understand what rights are. Right. And so what better way to really engage young people in a conversation to really talk about that what they see on a regular basis, right? In the media, right? What is imperialism? What is colonization? Boom, Star Wars all day, right? And if they can have those connections and we can bring that education to what they're viewing, those conversations will be part of their life, right? Ethnic studies isn't just a pedagogy, it's a lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? It's social justice. It's what everybody needs in their lives to really understand, especially with regard to everything that's happened over the past handful of years. We have students who are afraid to go to school because of school shootings. We have students who understand what police brutality is and murder and now domestic terrorism, right? And we have elementary school students asking questions. We can't, especially now in our socio-political context, we cannot shield them from that anymore because it's everywhere. Right. And, I'm lucky to be in a school district that actually, has elementary school teachers engaging not only the students, but the parents also in ethnic studies pedagogy. Right. So that they can take it home and have conversations with kids. And like I said, as entry level as to cartoons or movies. Right. They definitely can have ethnic studies in their lives.
I was just going to say, follow up with that story Lupe shared was sad, but it's nothing new. We've been seeing the same thing for centuries, right? In this country, reminds me of the test they gave the little kids with the doll. Racism is institutional, it's systematic, and we have to work to show value of the marginalized groups. And that's why racism exists in the way that it does, because these groups aren't valued. The kids could even see it. If a 7-year-old kid could say that, who taught that kid that? Is it that far gone to think that they just didn't see it on TV or they just picked it up? If it's that blatant, we're in the system, so it might be more difficult for us to see. But if a new life and a baby could see that, how crazy is that? And that just shows how important ethnic studies is. These people need to see themselves. We need to see ourselves. And until we do, until our legacies and our history is valued and realized, that without us, there would be no America, for example. Then maybe we wouldn't have these problems that we have right now. Maybe we wouldn't have an insurrection. And until those things are realized and appreciated and taught and deprogrammed from the racism that we've been taught, if a 7-year-old could pick it up, come on, man. Then we know that it's blatant. It's crazy. And so until we do that, we're going to continue to have these type of problems in our society.
You bring up a really good point. And I feel like I can be here all day with y'all, but I want to just remind those who are watching that there is a Q&A. So going through the discussion, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. We're going to reserve some time at the end to take questions from our audience. So if you have questions, you can start adding them in the Q&A section right now, and we'll get to it before we close. But good point, Alfonso. And, everyone has kind of touched on it, right? We're critiquing these systems, right? We're challenging these oppressive systems. And if we had ethnic studies, we wouldn't have had this insurrection, right? Maybe. And so my question, we don't know. But some people are fearful, right, of ethnic studies, that the ethnic studies is trying to just do that, right? Demolish democracy. So is that the case? Is that the purpose, right, of ethnic studies? That we're out to demolish our whole democracy and our whole society that we know of in America? Is that the goal of ethnic studies?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Guillermo and Lupe said it, and Ivan said it. It's based in love. It's based in loving yourself, just like in La Catch. If I do harm to you, I do harm to me. So definitely not. History has been used as a weapon. It's been weaponized against people. And so I think we have issues like the insurrection, because in history, the people who lost the Civil War won the history and kept the history that they wanted in place. And other marginalized groups didn't get an opportunity to have a say or contributions. I mean, inventions, anything in history. And so, no, it's not here to, displace other groups. It's here to show the truth. A lot of the truth has been hidden. And, yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that's a myth. The ethnic studies is divisive. The ethnic studies is indoctrination. And it's the opposite, right? I think many of us have gone to courses. For example, one time I took Greek mythology, right? I wasn't Greek at all, but I took something out of that class, right? I was able to understand all this, like you were talking about Star Wars, right? A lot of Star Wars, the basis is like mythology, right? And so you start learning. If you don't know, it's like you have this value, right? Like if I have like $100 bill and I hide it behind this wall, right? You will never know it's there, right? You never know it's there, but it doesn't lose its value, right? And that's what ethnic studies is. If students are not exposed to it, they'll never know the contributions of Africans to this country, right? This country was built in the back. They wouldn't understand that even indigenous people were enslaved in this nation, right? So many people say, well, oh man, you're going to teach them to hate our country. And no, it's like if I'm a geometry teacher, I'm going to teach my students to understand how triangles work, right? I'm not a math teacher, obviously, right? But in ethnic studies, you're not teaching kids to hate or to love their country, but you teach them how to learn to live with it, right? How to learn to value themselves, right? So it's not just a class for brown and black folks. It's a class for everyone, and it has to be responsive to your community. If I'm teaching, right, in a population of mostly Filipino community, I'm going to integrate some Filipino history, right, to make it relevant to those students, right? If I'm teaching in a community of mostly Anglo students, there's the historic figures that they fought for the liberation of other people. Some of them are not taught, right? So I'm going to be able to teach them with a pursuit of social justice, right? Or have people fought to make this a better world, so they can learn from those experiences and they can create a better world, right? And it's all about humanization, right? You got to teach kids to love themselves, regardless of what color, or creed, or religion they are, right? So it's very important to emphasize that once they love themselves, then they can love everyone else and accept everyone else. And I'm about to push back, because I think if every person had gone through ethnic studies and all those people that were part of the insurrection, okay, I think if they had gone through a critical ethnic studies coursework, I don't think it would have happened.
Yeah. And I want to say, like, I mean, and this is something that we should be really explicit about, and that is that we are Americans, right? So if you are racist and bigoted, you're anti-American. We are Americans, right? And also too, like this ethnic studies movement, I mean, like we started, right? It's for racialized ethnic groups, which is an umbrella of a lot of many different ethnic groups, right? That fall under that umbrella of the for racialized. So just the way that we have all come together in solidarity just shows you that we have that potential to relationship build and to build like true like democracy where we all have voice, right? And we all support one another. We have a lot of common history and we have a lot of differences, but we absolutely are about democracy and about voice and about equality, more than those other folks that think they're patriotic that just look like fools because they don't even know their own history, much less the history of us Americans.
I'd also like to add that how can you call an approach, a pedagogy, a discipline anti-democratic when a couple of pillars are love and community and solidarity, right? I'd like to think that all ethnic studies practitioners love America, love Americans, and as such, we hold this country and its institutions to higher expectations. Right. And so if we see something wrong, the conversations happen in our classrooms and from the student perspective, right? And we allow them to think critically about what changes can be made. So they can voice out their opinion, so they can act on it democratically to make those changes in the society that they want to see. Right. If we're not able to do that, if we don't do that in a classroom, then we support a decrease in rights. We support fascism, right? I would like to think that ethnic studies is some of the most democratic stuff, most American stuff that we can teach our students.
Awesome. I have one final question, then we have a couple questions from our participants. Who is ethnic studies for? Is it just for students of color? Who is ethnic studies for?
Everybody. Everybody who's willing to come to a space with love and understanding, right? That we want to approach our experiences and try to understand our socio-political and our historical context and our intersectionalities within our identity through love and understanding, right? At the same time, like I was just saying, like ethnic studies is for all Americans. Right. We already know that everything that we've been taught, everything we've been drilling into generations and generations and generations of Americans led us to where we're at today. Right. So now definitely is the time to really look at ethnic studies, to respect ethnic studies and to hold our institutions, especially the educational institutions, accountable for the role that it's played in creating what we have today.
Someone said at the beginning as well, like even though ethnic studies, like we're not obsessed with like data and test scores and all of that, but we do know that the data does show that ethnic studies is good for everyone, that everyone that has taken a good critical ethnic studies course has had increases in, you know, other test scores, like for English, college going rates, college like graduation rates, for all subgroups, including, you know, the white subgroup as well. So yeah, ethnic studies is for everyone. In order to have a truer democracy, everyone needs to have taken good critical ethnic studies.
Let me just say, ethnic studies saves people's lives. Ethnic studies is a lifesaver. I don't know how many kids have come to me and thanked me. It might have been years later, but came back from college or whatever, or could have been some kids in the streets and say, you know what, I see what you're talking about. I finally see. I don't know how many people have come back. And even some teachers at my school say, do you know how many lives you saved? I don't think you know how many lives you have saved by taking your time and loving on the kids. And that's what ethnic studies is. That's why it's important.
Beautiful. We have, so we're going to move and start taking some questions. We have quite a bit now. And I want to open it up a little more broadly. But one person asked, there's this need for curriculum. Where can folks find curriculum? I have one specifically for ethnic studies in their secondary music class. What resources would you recommend? And then also for middle school, right? Because focus tends to be high school, so there's a lot more accessible curriculum. But for those in pre-K through 8th grade, where can they find curriculum?
Well, one place where they can look to start seeing what curriculum is being developed right now that is critical ethnic studies curriculum, or how they can develop their own curriculum is through the Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Coalition. So they can go to liberatedethnicstudies.org to get information. We're going to be having our second institute. It's a 2-day on January 29th and 30th. It's like a curriculum that's in development, but what's more important is that once you kind of get familiar with it, get familiar with how we are creating the curriculum, then you can then take it to your, whatever your subject is and kind of like adapt it. But what's really special about what Liberated Ethnic Studies model curriculum is doing is that we are doing K through 12. And when I say we, like literally everyone on the screen is doing, we're all part of this K through 12. And what's beautiful is it's in all of the 4 racialized ethnic group subjects, plus also like an intro to ethnic studies and a comparative ethnic studies.
Can you name the 4 racialized groups just quickly, anyone?
Sure. So it's African American, Black studies, and then the second one is Chicanx, Latinx studies. The third one is Asian American, Pacific Islander, Arab American studies. So it's under that API. And then the last one is Native American studies.
Did anyone want to add on as far as any other place to find curriculum?
Just as a quick resource, not necessarily like a whole curriculum to run a class on, but just to gain an understanding of the approach of ethnic studies and some of the main concepts within ethnic studies is a book called Rethinking Ethnic Studies, right? Within that, especially if we're talking about a secondary music class, you can look at and learn about the 4 eyes of oppression. Right. Yeah, that book right there. Right. The 4 eyes of oppression. So you can kind of wrap your curriculum or a song or a critical analysis of any song from any artist from any generation. Right. And really take a look at what messages are being said. Right. In those songs. And then it also, there's so much more in there with regards to the framework and approaches to ethnic studies. So, yeah, just as a quick resource, just as an introduction for folks who've never taught ethnic studies. I'd say that's a really, really good resource to start with.
Yeah, I highly recommend the upcoming Liberated Ethnic Studies model curriculum that Lupe mentioned. A lot of us are working towards, creating that. And the good thing about that is coming for teachers in the classroom, right? So practitioners that we know what it is to be in the trenches. I think that's a good resource to be looked. But also, ethnic study has some values and principles. And I think once you learn these values and principles, you can start transforming your own curriculum, right, to be culture relevant. But for some quick resources, Teaching Tolerance has some great resources already, units. They already focus on ethnic studies. The Howard Zinn Project will be another resource that you can start looking at that they're pretty much complement ethnic studies pedagogy and content. So those are some quick resources. But I challenge you, join us in the Liberated Ethnic Studies model curriculum, right, in the trainings, because I think that once you grasp that pedagogy, I think that you build your curriculum. Your curriculum is going to look different. My curriculum will look different from Ivan and Lupe. But as long as I have the fidelity of ethnic studies, right, and as long as I'm implementing the values and guidelines, you are creating your own ethnic studies curriculum.
And I'm going to try, with our time that we have left, there's multiple questions basically asking how can educators support? right? How might they be able to bring this to their district? How might we be able to, make this a mandate at the state level? Even how can educators outside of the classroom support, right? So how can counselors support ethnic studies? What can we do collectively for ethnic studies in support of it, not just in the classroom, but like, as you said, as a pedagogy and also at the legislative level?
So at the statewide level, Jose Medina just introduced a bill, AB 101. And so, we can support that bill, but we also need to really ask that AB 101 have language in it, or that language be added to ensure that it is supporting like a true ethnic studies, a critical ethnic studies, and that there's like deference to the field, right, to the discipline. And so, one of the things that we all need to be doing is ensuring that we're really looking at what the experts in ethnic studies are saying, what the discipline is saying the discipline is. We can't, just as we wouldn't do to math or science, we need to make sure to go with the definition that the ethnic studies practitioners and scholars are saying is a definition, and not just be loosey-goosey and create our own. So AB 101, and we need to really push on Medina and the legislators to ensure that that's like pushing a good critical one. And then it depends on your context. So in some cases, like you might want to get support at your school site to get ethnic studies courses to be offered. Counselors are super important, because they're the ones that are like the ones that see the student before the student gets to the teacher. And if they're not pushing those courses, then sometimes, the course, no one wanted the course, right? That's kind of like the excuse to like take the course off the books. So we need the counselors to just know, like, even if the kid has not ever heard of ethnic studies, to just know that that kid's going to be in good hands once they get into an ethnic studies course. And then, if AB 101 passes, we won't need to pass resolutions on a district by district level. But if you want to get ethnic studies right now before, waiting for the state, you can start talking with, other people, other teachers, organizations that are doing this work in your area, and try to get a resolution passed at the school board level. You can go to ethnicstudiesnow.com, and there's a toolkit there where if you click on it, a bunch of resolution examples that have been passed at districts throughout the state, and even in a few other states, those resolutions are there. And you want to make sure that those resolutions include things like, ensuring that teachers have an input on what ethnic studies is, that they have an input on the development of the curriculum. And then, of course, there are consultants out there, ethnic studies consultants, and there are professors. There are folks out there that know what ethnic studies is, that can help you, that can come in and do professional learning. So I mean, those are just a few things I can think of right now.
Yeah, if we had 2 more hours, I think I'd be able to answer this question.
Exactly.
But I would say that you just start not only with yourself, but with your colleagues. Start looking at your curriculum, start talking to community members and community organizations, because you're going to need that backup, and start putting the seed with your principal. Start putting that seed with your board members. I think board members are key to have that conversation. Why is our district doing about ethnic studies, right? Because like Lupe said, that it must pretty likely that there's going to be some legislation that's going to make it a requirement for all California to take an ethnic studies course. So let's say you want to be ahead of that. But I think it's just having these conversations, in your departments, during lunch, with parents, students, and it's just start the conversation going. And like Lupe said, there's a lot of resources out there, right? You can hit any of us here, and we can, also direct you to some resources and people in your area. They're already working at ethnic studies. Like I know Alfonso because I work with Alfonso, and I know Alfonso is up in the Bay Area. So if I run into a teacher looking for ethnic study, I'm going to connect them with Alfonso. If I'm or Ivan as well, or Lupe in Los Angeles, right? And then if you're in the San Diego area, look me up. I'm here.
If I could just add on to what Lupe was saying also, right? Definitely take the grassroots approach, go to your board, But speaking from experience, right? We've had an ethnic studies department at our high school for 17 years now, right? One major thing that I'd like to suggest to any of you all, after you win your ethnic studies department and after you get those resolutions, make sure maybe some of those resolutions or add addendums to those resolutions that say and mandate that not only do your teachers, but your administrators on site and even the district administrators go to those professional development sessions. Because from experience, a lot of administrators come in onto our sites and they'll know nothing about ethnic studies. Board members know nothing about ethnic studies, right? They'll prop it up and they'll say, this is great, we have it, anytime that they have to check off boxes for compliance. But ethnic studies classes and departments cannot continue to exist and be sustainable without that support from admin and the board. We need to make sure that they understand and know what it is, because if they don't, they're not going to support it. It's not going to continue. You're not going to get the funding you need to exist, right? If there's one thing that I want to pass on to folks, it's that. Make sure that those people that can make those decisions, those people that control the money for your funding and your budgets, make sure they know what ethnic studies is and what it can do for the community, not just the students, but the whole community, right? We definitely want to make sure that the community is conscious about our programs and our classes and what we can do.
And real quick, we only got like 2 minutes, but I'll speak real quick. Start with the students as well. If you're building a program, plant the seed in them and let them know, start teaching them and letting them know how important it is and what it will be like. And would they be interested and spread the word? Definitely. If you start at the grassroots level as well, like we said, and build it yourself from your students. And that's how I did it.
We have had, and I wish we could very rich conversation, very informative. I want to thank you all as our panelists. I know, just to recap, to try to summarize all of the knowledge that you've shared, is that ethnic studies essentially is a holistic pedagogical approach to students' education. It is a critical lens on these systems of oppression that is rooted in love and community and solidarity and self-love, and extending that love to others. And that this is something that there are lots of resources available. So I want to encourage everyone who is here tonight to go back to your school sites, to your districts, to your communities, and continue the conversation, continue to reach out, share resources. Remember that this is not new, right? Some districts might say, oh, this is what's trending in the media, but remember, this is a discipline that is over 50 years old. And you can say over 500 years if you want to go pre the first ethnic studies classes and departments. But this is not new. This is a continuous movement for liberation, and ethnic studies is for everyone. Right? Everyone needs ethnic studies to better our society and to reaffirm our beliefs in democracy and respect and humanity for one another, which is so appropriate at a time like this. So I want to thank all of you. Someone asked the question, why are so many educators resistant to ethnic studies, which is a phenomenal question. So I want to invite you back next Tuesday for our next panel, where we're going to talk about the challenges of implementing ethnic studies and what are some of the reasons and rationale for resistance to it? What are some of the problems, and how are other educators overcoming those barriers? So stay tuned next week. And then the third week, we are going to bring in students. We're going to have students. And if you have students that you'd like to, you think would be great to impact, please reach out. But we're going to bring in students to actually hear and lift up our student voices. How have they been impacted? You've heard them say over and over again that ethnic studies saves lives, and want to hear from those lives that have been saved by ethnic studies. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists, Guadalupe Cardona, Alfonso Thompson, Guillermo Gomez, Ivan Varay Santos, thank you so much for joining us. To everyone else, stay tuned next week. We'll see you. Have a great evening. Be safe, be well. Peace and love, peace and love, peace and love.